Good morning. As we were leading up to today and the weather forecast was saying we were going to have 6 inches of snow or whatever it was, I thought, how ironic that we start a series called Gathering and we're going to have to cancel church. So the whole point is we will not stop gathering unless it snows. But it didn't, and so God in His infinite wisdom has even made it more ironic to say, it's going to snow a little bit, just enough to prove your point of the message, and say, nobody's going to show up to church. But that's okay, because we're still gathering, because that's the point of this series, is we are going to gather. We're not going to give up no matter what. And this series is based off of a scripture in Hebrews 10:25. I'm going to start off today just by reading that in the beginning. It says, "Let us not neglect our meeting together, as some people do, but encourage one another, especially now that His day of return is drawing near." So even though we're supposed to gather, we often choose to do other things. Going to church so often has become like, if I don't have something else to do, then I might go to church. As a matter of fact, 32% of people that call themselves Christians are the only ones that attend church on a regular basis. That means almost 70% of people who say they're followers of Jesus don't attend church on a weekly basis. And we make all these excuses as to why we're not going to go. Like, it's too hot out and I'm going to go out and play. Or it's too cold out and I don't want to get out in the cold. Or there was half an inch of snow out and I already planned on not going. I already had this idea in my head I wasn't going to go tomorrow, so I'm not going to go. Or I have projects at the house I need to get done. Or whatever it is, we put all these things in front of attending church on a regular basis. So my goal in this series is we're going to talk about what that means to gather. What that means for you, what that means for me, what our role as a church is in that. We're going to talk about, our role as far as what we're supposed to do as attending church. We're going to talk about small groups and our role in that. We're going to talk about the purpose of the church itself in this series. And today's message is actually entitled Hooked. But before I get into that, I wanted to tell you guys a quick story. A couple of years ago now, we decided for a summer we were going to do church a little bit differently. We were going to go out to this farm. I call it a farm because the people that were friends of the church that let us use it, they call it a farm. It didn't look like any farm I've ever been on. It looked like a little piece of heaven to me. It was this beautiful place with 5 ponds out there. We would go out there, and there was this beautiful pavilion. As a matter of fact, I have a picture of the pavilion up here. This is us at one of the experiences out there. We would have the pavilion where people would gather, and in front we would set up a tent. We would have worship. We would worship for about, a couple songs. We would do a little 15-minute message. It was a great time. Afterwards, we would get together and we would continue to gather. Even though we didn't have the same type of building or place, we would gather and we would have a message, we would have worship, we would have, potlucks, barbecues, we would fish afterwards. We'd have, a good time. The kids would go out and go fishing. There's 5 ponds out there that were stocked. It was just this awesome. It was one of the most memorable summers that I probably have had and will continue to have for a while. So it was a great time going out there. See, I love to fish. I really like to fish with my kids. Now, notice I didn't say I love to fish with my kids. I just like to fish with my kids, because fishing with my kids, it's gotten better lately, but fishing with my kids is kind of like me fishing by myself with 4 rods going at the same time, because I've got to bait everyone. Sometimes I had to cast everyone before. They're much better at that. I have to take the hooks out of any fish that they catch. It's just quite an experience, and it makes it more difficult sometimes. And I maybe get a little frustrated because I don't get that time. But I do like going out there and fishing with them. There's this one Sunday, and we're getting ready to have church out there, and the kids were out before church, and they were fishing. And it's just minutes before I'm going to gather everybody together. People would come early, and they would just go disperse and have fun. Then we gather them together and say, hey, everybody come back. We're getting ready to start church. We're going to do a couple worship songs. And it was just a minute or two before I was getting ready to gather anybody in. And my youngest son, Caden, comes up to me and he says, Dad, Logan needs your help. He's got a fish hooked and he's got to get it. And I'm like, I got to start. I got the microphone in my hand. I'm getting ready to call everybody up for worship. I'm not going to go help him right now. I turned to Caden and I said, you tell your brother if he can't get a hook out of his fish on his own, he doesn't deserve to be fishing. So anyway, I decide, okay, I go get the person that's leading worship, and I tell them, hey, we're getting ready to have worship right now, and get on up here and get together. And I look, and Caden's off in like kind of just a little bit of way, and it was almost like, in my memory, it was almost like a cartoon when things are going frantic. Like he's like running around like, like going crazy. And I'm like, what is going on with these fools over there? And so I get ready to call everybody up, and I get up, I get the microphone turned on, I look off in the distance, and I see a friend of mine, Heath, who's one of the pastors before I was here, and I see him and Logan over on the side, and Caden's getting him, and there's some commotion going on, and I'm like, man, I better go see what's going on. So I go over there, and I'm like, all right, so I walk down, and here's what I run into, is Logan had caught a fish. He'd caught this catfish right here on his hook. So at the time, I'm thinking, you need to get your own hook out of your own fish if you're going to fish. Little did I know the fish was almost the size of Logan at the time. And if you guys know Heath, he has these massive paws, and that catfish is just swallowing his hand whole. So that day, I definitely did not win the Dad of the Year award. I was thinking, I am quite the jerk at this moment in life. Anyway, I love fishing. And I've got so many fishing stories to tell. I love telling fishing stories. This is one of my favorite fishing stories, even though it doesn't directly involve me. But the thing I love about fishing is it's just that opportunity. It's hard for me to find as much time anymore because you got to put the cell phone away and you got to put other responsibilities away, and you just get out there and you're just kind of one with nature and with quiet. And even those quiet times, you have that opportunity with God, because God likes to speak to me a lot whenever there's nothing else around. Whenever I actually shut up long enough to listen to him, he tends to have something to say. But here's the thing about fishermen in general. All fishermen, they have stories. They have stories to tell. Stories of the one that got away, stories of the biggest fish they caught, real stories like that where the fish is almost the same size as you are. But the analogy that I'm going to make today as we talk about the ultimate fishing story, the best fishing story that there is found in the Bible, is whether you like fishing, whether you hate fishing, whether you're impartial to fishing, whether you don't really care and you think this message isn't for me today about fishing. As we go to the first point, your life is a fishing trip. And you should have fishing stories. Your life that you live is a fishing trip. And if you're living life as a Christian, then you should have fishing stories. You should have fishing stories that you're able to tell other people. We're going to start off today in the book of Luke. And we're going to look in chapter 5, verse 1. And as we're telling this story, Jesus is out on the Sea of Galilee, and he's teaching this message. And the Sea of Galilee is really, he's actually on the shores, sorry, not on the sea at this time, but he's on the shores. And the Sea of Galilee is really big. It's 13 miles long by 8 miles wide. There's 30 towns that surround this area. And Jesus is talking to so many people that they begin to press in. They just, the crowd forms and more start to come behind them. And as they come, they're all trying to get close so they can hear. And as they get closer, Jesus is kind of getting pushed back. And before he knows it, he's kind of just on the edge of the shore. And so that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to read this together. You can look at the screens. It's in your talk notes. You can always follow along in YouVersion as well, too. As we start off in Luke 5, chapter 1, it says, "One day, Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret," which is also the Sea of Galilee. It has two separate names. It also has three names, but for easy's sake, we'll just go with these two. People were crowding around them and listening to the word of God. He saw the water's edge two boats that were left there by the fishermen who were out there washing their nets. So these guys had been out fishing all night, and they hadn't caught a thing. I don't know how many of you guys have been fishing before and been out for hours and not caught a thing. That's what happens a lot to me. As a matter of fact, the last fishing excursion that we went on, we went out to the dock and fished for hours and hours and hours and caught some rocks and some sticks and lost a lot of bait and didn't catch a thing. And it's just frustrating. Like, you sit out there the whole time, and sometimes I don't even care if I catch a big fish. I'll catch a minnow for all I care. I just want something to bite. So it's really frustrating when you're out there fishing all night and you don't catch a thing. It says Jesus got into one of the boats, the one that belonged to Simon, and he asked him to put it out from the shore. Then he sat down and he taught the people from the boat. So if you can imagine, These guys are pretty upset at this time. They've been fishing all night, and Jesus comes back and he gets in one of their boats. And he's like, hey, you know what? I need you to take me out. And they're really frustrated. They'd spent an entire night wasted. And they're out there washing their nets and mending their nets, because what happened is, so they've got these nets, these big nets, and they throw them out, and they've got weights on the outside. The weights fall down as they pull the net up. The weights come together, the fish are in it, and they pull the fish in. Well, there's no fish to catch. What are they going to catch? Rocks and sticks, and it's going to tear up their nets all night. And so they're getting their nets mended, and they're not like me. I get frustrated when I go fishing and I don't catch anything, but that just means that I'm not going to have a story to tell, or I may not get to eat a fish. But this is their job. They fished all night, and we're getting paid nothing to work all night. They're really frustrated at this time. And Jesus gets in there after they've been fishing all night, and he jumps in this boat, and he's just like, hey, Simon, row, row, row your boat. Come on, let's go. We're going on out to sea. As we see in there, he says, Jesus saw the water's edge 2 boats that were left there by the fishermen. So he jumped in one of them. At this time, we have to remember that Jesus is also facing this issue. He's got this issue where the crowds are pressing in on him. And he's trying to figure out what he's going to do. And he runs into these angry fishermen. They're angry because they've been working all night and nothing's happened. And so he's trying to figure out what he's going to do as he gets pulled back. And so what does Jesus do as he's getting pushed back? He says, I got to figure out how these crowds are going to hear me. I got to figure out how these people that are in the back that are pushing their way towards the front are going to hear this message I have, because it's really good. They need to hear about the Father. They need to hear about salvation. So how am I going to do that? Well, maybe this Simon guy can go up there and get a PA system that's up out on the top of the... No, they didn't have PA systems. That's not going to work, Or Jesus said, you know what? It's not going to work. This just isn't going to work. I'm not going to be able to figure it out, because these people are coming in and they're just talking over each other. And I tell them to quiet down so everybody can hear, but they won't quiet down. So if nobody can hear the message, then nobody's going to hear it. So I'm just not even going to... No, that's not what he did at all either. What he did was he looked around and he saw what he had and he used it. Jesus used what he had. He didn't make excuses. He didn't give up. But he figured out a way to use what was right, to use what he had there so he could deliver this message to the people. It says he got in one of the boats that belonged to Simon, and he asked him to put it out from shore. And he sat there and taught the people from the boat. Why would he do that? He was using what he had. He used the boat as his pulpit, and as he pushed out to water, he had a natural environment which would allow his voice to carry. He had water underneath him, he had mountains behind him, and the people in front of him. And the sound that he had was going to bounce off the back and echo towards the front. He was going to be able to use what he had in his environment to deliver this message that people needed to hear. But what do we do sometimes? We say, well, I'm not going to bring people to church. It's not very big. There's not that many people in here, and it might kind of look weird. Or they might take my seat. That's my seat. If more people start coming to this church, then I'm not going to have my seat to sit in. They might accidentally sit in that. Or we think, you know what, it's just, I kind of like it this way. It's comfortable. I know everybody. We're all friends here. We're all family. We all love each other. If new people came in, that'd be weird. We don't want that. We don't want different people in here. But God is trying to tell us that it's time to find those ordinary things. Find those things that we just see in our life. That boat that's sitting over on the side of the water. And take that ordinary thing and begin to use it for something extraordinary so that you can tell your fishing story. Because you have a fishing story to tell. Each one of us, as followers of Jesus, has a fishing story to tell. So what is something in your life that's ordinary, that God wants to make extraordinary? What is a hobby you have? What is a thing that you like to do? What is a place that you like to hang out where there's not a lot of other people that know about Jesus hanging out there? What is that ordinary thing in your life? Because it's time to notice those simple things like Jesus did that you can use to turn into something amazing. See, there's 3 types of people that are going to walk into this door here. The first type of person that's going to walk into this door here are going to be people that don't know about Jesus at all. never heard about him, don't follow him. Maybe they've heard of him, but they don't know what having a relationship with him is like. And that is what we try to model these experiences around each week. We try to make an experience that makes those people feel comfortable. If you think back to that story in Matthew chapter 7, where Jesus first met, sorry, it wasn't chapter 7, it was Matthew chapter 2, or Mark chapter 2, where Jesus first met, wrong book, wrong chapter. Mark chapter 2, where Jesus first met Matthew. That's where I got confused. Where Jesus first met Matthew. And he takes Matthew down to the tax collectors, and they're all having a meeting, and then the Pharisees are like, what are you guys doing all meeting with tax collectors? And Jesus is like, I didn't come here for the sick. I came here for the unhealthy. Think of this place like a hospital. We don't meet here. We don't gather here for the healthy. We gather here for the sick. We gather here so the sick can come in. So those people that come in the door that don't know Jesus, that's what this place is for. And that's one type of person that comes in. There's a second type of person that could come in here. It could be that person that is following Jesus. They kind of have that relationship with him. But they're not going to share their fishing story. They're not going to share the story that they have in their life. I mean, they have this life that they lived, and they know, hey, I was swimming around in sin. And then all of a sudden I saw the hook and the bait, which was Jesus Christ, and I bit, and now I'm going to keep that to myself. That's my story. But they're scared to go tell anybody else about that story. And the third type of person to come in here might be, a person who is out there willing to share their story and sharing their story and being as evangelical as they can about the life I had before and the life I have now. So I ask you this today, as we talk about these three different people, what kind of person do you fall into? Which category are you in? I mean, are you one that is wearing your fishing gear? You went to Bass Pro, you bought all the stuff, you got the boat, but now it's just sitting in your driveway? You got all the equipment and the tackle boxes ready. You got all the clothes, you're putting them on, but you're not actually going out and going fishing. It's just sitting there. So you wearing the gear, or are you actually out fishing? I want to look at the boat for just a second, because I think there's three different things that this boat can represent. The boats in general represent. And the first thing is a boat is a place of intimacy. It's a place of intimacy that you can go, like if you go out in a boat, it's just you, the boat, and the water. And if you're lucky, God's going to come along with you for two reasons. One, so you live, and two, so you can have that time. Because whenever you're out there, it's just this intimate, quiet time between you and nature. And the other thing that you could do is you could actually bring somebody else along in the boat. I can remember some of my best memories I have of storytelling and time together with me and my grandfather were out on a boat. See, when we would go down and visit him, he would get up at 5:30 to go check the trot lines, and he'd take me with him. It's usually my brothers and sisters and everybody there, but they didn't wake up early like I did. And so it was just him and I, and we'd go out on the boat early in the morning. And I mean, I could tell you so many stories that he told me, so many things that we had time together in just this intimate situation with just him and I. No distractions, nothing else, no TV, no little brother coming up. My mom's not telling me to do something. It's just this intimate situation of you and them. And that's how it is with Jesus. When you take the time to get on the boat and go out with him and just sit there and listen, he wants to have that intimacy with you. The second thing a boat is it's a place of instruction. It's a place of instruction. First of all, you have to follow a lot of instructions if you're on a boat. If you don't follow the instructions, it's not like walking around on land. You will fall and you might die depending on where you are, how deep the water is. If you're out in the middle of the ocean, there's no swimming back to anything. You have to follow and respect the rules. Whenever you go on a cruise ship or something, they go through this whole rules thing beforehand so you don't fall over and die out in the middle of an ocean or a sea or wherever you are. And what did Jesus do? He used this boat to teach. He used this boat to give instruction. He used this boat to go out and give a message from it because he knew what needed to be done, and so he found what he had in order to do that. And the last thing is a boat can be a place of irritation. It can be a place of irritation. I tell you, I probably have 4 or 7 irritation boat stories, but I'll tell you the one that happened to me most recently, about a year ago. My wife and I went to Florida, and we had the opportunity to learn in quotes how to sail on these little catamarans. And the instructor took us out, 15-minute lesson. Here, you do this. Take the mast out a little bit and have it loose if you want to go faster, and tight if you want to go slower, and you turn away from whatever. And I think you guys are good. Have fun. I'll see you later. And so we decided to take this little catamaran out ourselves. And as we float out, we get, probably 3/4 of the way out as far as we ended up going. We were planning on going much further out, and things got really scary. I tell you what, if you want to test your relationship at the same time as you go closer together, that's a great way to do it. Because as much as we were both just like, oh my gosh, I think in my memory how it went was she said, I'm really scared, and I said, me too. And at that moment, I gave her zero comfort whatsoever that I knew what I was doing. I knew for sure we were going to flip that boat, be upside down, both die at that moment. So it was definitely a place of irritation as you're like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get this to move forward. And you can see Simon was he was irritated with Jesus in this situation. I mean, he's been out working all night long. And one thing we know about Simon is he's not the coolest, most level-headed guy there is. And so he's out there working, and Jesus just hops in his boat, and he's like, row, row, buddy, let's go. And so he's irritated with this situation. He's like, you want me to do what? I've been out there fishing all night long, and now you want me to go back out there? I'm busy. I'm cleaning my nets. The other thing is there's a rule when you go fishing that if you have a fishing guide, one thing that you do not do is tell your fishing guide how to fish. They know what they're doing. They are the professionals. And we'll see that's exactly what Jesus did in this situation. It says in Luke 5:4, it says, when he, meaning Jesus, had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into deep water and let down the nets for you to catch. So here's Simon, this professional fisherman that's been fishing all night long, and Jesus is telling him, hey, guess what? You're doing it wrong. Go on out deeper and you'll catch fish. And Simon's probably thinking, dude, you're just a board hammering, nail hitting carpenter. You're a little fixer-upper guy. How do you know how to fish? I know how to fish. I'm a professional fisherman. I do this for a living. It's 100 degrees out there. If we go out deep, the nets don't even go that deep. We are not going to catch any fish. And again, I know this because Simon was, I'm sure, thinking this way because his personality, Simon Peter's personality, was he was rude, he was crude, he was short-tempered, he was socially unacceptable. So I'm sure that he wasn't just calmly sitting there thinking, well, that's a good idea, Jesus. Yeah, let's do that. But I don't want you to miss this part of the story, how important it is to the story, but also how important it is to your life. He says, put out into the deep water and put down your nets for a catch. If you want to catch something, you're not going to do it from the shore. You got to go out deep. You got to put your nets out. You got to try. You're not going to catch something sitting on your couch at home. You're not going to catch something watching TV. You're not going to catch something doing nothing. But you have to go out and you have to fish. If you're going to catch something, you have to fish. You have to fish in your neighborhood. You have to fish at your school. You have to fish at the grocery store. You have to fish when you go out to dinner. You have to fish wherever you are. But if you plan on catching something, you have to actually fish. Go out and put out your nets. In verse 5, here's actually what Peter said. Simon answered, he said, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I'll let down the nets. What I read in this verse as Peter says this is a lot of excuses and doubt. He has excuses and then he has doubt. We worked hard all night, but whatever you say, I'll try it. I asked the person to go to church before, but whatever, it just doesn't work. Or I already tried to lead my family, but they don't listen to me. But whatever. I tried to tell my story, but nobody would listen. We have excuses, and we have doubt. But what I love about the story and what I love about our lives is God can use our doubt. Jesus can use that doubt to make something extraordinary happen. And that's exactly what happens in this story. As we look at verse 6, it says, when they had done so, when they'd actually gone out and he listened to them and he put down those nets, they'd caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and they filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell to Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of the fish they had taken. And so were James, John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partner. What a catch they had. So those of us that are followers of Jesus, our life is a fishing trip. And if you're doing what Jesus wants you to do, you're out there fishing. And just like in this story, it's the same with your life. If you fish, Jesus will catch. If you fish, Jesus will catch. That's what he told Peter in the story. You go out there and drop your nets, and I'm going to make sure there's fish underneath them. And he tells us that too. If you fish, then I'll catch. This is our calling as Christians, to go out there, to go deep, and go fishing. I mean, Jesus says this to us just like whenever I'm talking to my kids, he says, go fish. That's what I'm telling you to do. I'm telling you to go. What are you doing? Why are you still sitting here? I've been telling you to go fish, but you're doing nothing. You might think, well, I just want to live my life as an example. If I just live as an example of a Christian, then people will see my example. Well, what if Jesus had done the same thing? What if he came to this earth and said, well, I'm not going to use words and talk to people. I'm just going to be an example. I'm just going to be an example. I'm still going to do the whole die on a cross and raise again, but I'm not going to go see the disciples afterward. I'm just going to go ahead and go to heaven because I really don't want to talk to people about this. And we have to use words. We have to tell our fishing stories. We need to go out there and tell our stories, tell what happened to us. As believers, we all have a fishing story to tell. All of us were swimming in a sea of sin at one point. And each of us saw that bait and took that bait and found new life. And we have to go tell that story. I mean, you might be thinking, I'm not good enough to tell my story. I mean, that's where I was for a long time. I actually thought that myself. Like these people that I'm running around with, they know what I did yesterday. They know what I did last month. They saw me do it. I was sitting around them and with them. And if I go try to tell them my story, then they're not going to listen to me. They're going to think I'm a hypocrite. They're going to think I'm a horrible person. And we see that's exactly what Simon did at the same time. Simon felt that same way as Jesus responded to him. He said, "Go away from me, Lord, for I'm a sinful man." And if we pick back up in the rest of verse 10, then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." Don't be afraid. That's the biggest thing that we face when we don't go fishing, is that we're afraid. We're afraid of what somebody's going to say. What's the worst they're going to say? No. If we invite somebody to church, they may not come, but we won't know if we don't go fish. We got to fish so Jesus can catch. We fish, he catches. You know what I think about all the time is I think about that story in Matthew 7, got it right this time, in Matthew 7, where it talks about wide is the path that leads to destruction, and narrow is the gate and the road that leads to eternity in heaven. And whenever I see somebody Now think of that story. See, every person that's walking this earth, every person you work with, every person that walks in this church, doesn't walk in this church, is going down the street, driving down the road, you see at the grocery store, wherever you see, every person is going one of two places. They're going to heaven or they're going to hell. Every person in your family, every friend that you have, they're going to heaven or they're going to hell. And we have to go fish. Because narrow is the road that leads to eternity. And that's not because there's only so much room. It's because people are not going to hear the story of Jesus because we're not out there fishing. We're not telling our story. And if you're a follower of Jesus and you don't have a heart to tell your fishing story, you don't have a heart to go out and look somebody in the eye and just be sad that that person is going to go to hell because they don't know the story of Jesus, because you didn't take the time to tell them the story of Jesus, then honestly, you might really need to evaluate your relationship with Jesus. I mean, these are hard words, I know. But I say this because I love you, because I love all these people that we come in contact with. But we have to go out and share our story. And nobody's going to know the story of Jesus unless we're out there telling them. In John 6:44 it says, "For no one can come to me unless the Father who sends me draws them to me. In the last day I will raise them up." See, they have to be drawn to Jesus, but how can they be drawn to Jesus if they don't know about Jesus? We have to go out there and fish. We have to go out there and tell our stories. You fish, Jesus will catch. You fish, he'll catch. I have these bracelets that Perry and Tim are going to hand out to you guys real quick here. That I think these are really awesome. I mean, you might not be into this fishing as I am, so you may not care. But here's kind of the point of them that I wanted to use with these. I want to challenge you this week. I want to challenge you to put these on and wear them. Wear them to remind you that you need to tell your fishing story. Use them as a conversation starter, possibly. Like maybe somebody comes up and says, "Hey, I like your bracelet, it's pretty cool. Where did you get that?" Tell them about Ignite. Tell them about how you found life in Jesus. Share your story of when you were swimming in a sea of sin and Jesus came along and made your life pure and perfect. Utilize these to just remind yourself, I need to share my story. Even with people that don't see it, if you have it on, remember, I need to share my story with somebody. But tell people about how one day Jesus came along. And you took the bait and you're hooked. Because people are never going to hear about the life of Jesus Christ if we are not out there fishing. How he can change lives. How he changed your life. You fish, he'll catch. Wide is the path that leads to destruction, but narrow is the path that leads to eternity. Pray with you guys. Jesus, I love you so much, Lord. I pray, first of all, for courage for each one of us. That courage to be able to share our story and how you changed our life as we come in contact with different people at school or at work or just out in the community. That you could possibly use these bracelets, possibly not, I don't care, but whatever it is, that you would give us the opportunity and give us the courage to share your story with other people. Secondly, Lord, I pray that you would give us that courage to just invite people to be a part of this. That we would invite people to church here so they could hear your message. That we could go out there and we could be fishers for you. Because I know that if people come in and they hear that message and they hear that love that you have and they feel that relationship that we have as we gather here each week, as we gather here for different events, Lord, I know that you want to do a work in this place. But it takes us to be your feet. It takes us to get out there and get into the community and talk to people and be a part of that and bring people in, and we fish that you will catch them, Lord. I pray that those opportunities not only come up, but we take advantage of those. Whether it's in our school or in our home or whatever it is that our life is, that is surrounding us, those people, that when we look at people in the eye, we don't just see them as somebody that we love and care about, but we truly look at their eternity that they have, and we realize that without us telling our story to them, there's a chance that person one day is going to go to hell because they truly didn't know your story, that they didn't have that opportunity, that we just made that assumption that they have a relationship with you. Lord, I pray that we would just be such strong fishermen out there each and every day. In your glorious name, I pray. Amen.